Hi and welcome. Today I'm doing a piece that's in my art journal that I made, and I start out with a piece of mixed media paper that's 5x5, and here I'm prepping my stencil I'm going to work with, and it's kind of like a boho stencil. I got the pattern off of my Cricut and cut it, and I'm using some distress inks. This is let's see, I did peeled paint, picked raspberry, and vintage photo, and then I spray it with some water, some light spray, and then I place it down on my paper that I've cut, and that's mixed media paper. And this piece is all about layering. I'm doing layering of different media and just trying to get so you really, if you look at this piece, you see different things each time maybe you look at it. So the ink that's left on that page, I just take and kind of press it onto another page that maybe I can use on my collages. But I'm kind of spreading out some of the loose paint here, loose ink, and then I give it a good dry before I can move on to another step. So my next layer is using acrylic paint. This is an Amsterdam titanium buff, and I'm using a makeup sponge and a stencil again that I just cut on my Cricut, and I just wanted it to be something that you might have to look twice to see it. So it's just a light color, and it's just gonna kind of sneak in from the back. And I only do this in the two corners. And actually, that lower one I end up kind of covering up, so I don't think you actually end up seeing that one. So that's got to dry. And then I go in with a Posca Paint Pen in white, and I'm just kind of outlining some of that stencil to make it stand out just a little bit more, but still not in your face. And if this gets a little too tedious for you, you can speed it up. I've already sped it up some, and so you can use that little gear to speed it up. And that has to dry a little bit. And I'm doing some background stamping. That's a Tim Holtz stamp, and I'm using the white pigment ink pad from Ranger, and I'm just using it because it's the one I have that works pretty good with to add some embossing powder. It doesn't dry real quick, so it's usually the one I go to unless I want color. But so I'm just adding a little bit of embossing powder, and I think it's a kaleidoscope, I guess the color is. So it'll have a little bit of shimmer, and you should be able to still see the colors behind it. So I've embossed that now, and And there's a couple areas I'm just going back with a fatter bullnose tip Posca Paint Pen, filling in those circles because, again, I just thought it wasn't quite enough. And then it dries again. And I have that flower that I drew on some book paper. I end up not using that, so I keep thinking I'm going to use it, but that's not what I end up using. And now I'm going to add some stamping, and this is with lilac, shaded lilac, and just another kind of weird stamp. And I ended up not really liking the shape that it gives, so I kind of just use my paintbrush and add the color, but not the pattern. And in the final piece, you just see just a small hint of that lilac. That's fossilized amber, another distress ink, and I do like the way that turned out, and so you do see some of that in the final piece. I think this is about where I go in and try removing some of that. Because with distress ink, it's water activated. So as long as you haven't sealed it with anything, you can move it around. So I move that around a little bit, and I do a little bit of the fossilized amber too, and then dab some off. I think that's when I realized I don't want that. So I have a stamp that I've had forever that I got at Michael's or something, and I thought this piece looks really dainty, and I thought, well, maybe a little chandelier, candelabra kind of thing would look really nice on the page. So I'm using some black StazOn ink. And you can't really tell much from right here, but I kind of get a ghost image when I did that. And at first I'm thinking, oh, I don't care. I'm not into perfection, but later I do find a way to remedy that. And I just kind of added to make that chain look like it went all the way up. So there I'm like, okay, I don't like that. And I had it's a piece of a jelly print, but I only did it like in a neutral color, maybe the titanium buff. so that I could add things to it. And so here I'm taking a stencil and adding some of the picked raspberry. And now I can add some collage to this piece as well. So I'm just covering up the image that was part of the image that was ghost printed too. And then I'll just stamp that chandelier on top of it again. But I end up really liking the jelly print there. It just adds a whole nother layer and texture. I just thought it worked out. Happy accident. So I'm getting ready to stamp on top of that, just trying to line it up. And good enough. And I'd like to add a little bit of shimmer on top of the candelabras. So I'm taking an embossing pen and just going over some of the crystals, some of the candles, and before it dries, I'm adding on some embossing powder, and then I'll go on to the other one. Then I use my embossing tool and set that embossing powder, and now I'm taking some of that picked raspberry on a text stamp and just adding it in a few places. And I don't put it on a stamp block because I just want to use parts of it, little pieces of the stamp on it. I don't want a whole image. And now I'm just buffing the edges with the picked raspberry. And I'm going to be adding another focal image. And I've got this butterfly stamp, and I'm just trying to get a good image on this. I don't know, it's a mylar. I had it in my stash for a long time. And so it took me 3 to get a good image. And I'm just cutting it out, and then I add some of that embossing pen to different areas of it. Actually, I think I'm coating the whole thing, and then adding some embossing powder, the same kaleidoscope. I really don't have very many embossing powders. I need to get some more. And I'm holding it with some tweezers because it's pretty small and my heat gun gets pretty warm. And these are really, they come with my Cricut, and so they just, or the Cricut tools. And so it's real nice to use it to hold it. So I kind of bend the butterfly on each side of the body and just have it gluing just on the body of the butterfly. And that's dry. And the last thing I'm going to do is add a sentiment. And again, these are just sayings that I hear or read, and I'm like, oh, that'll be good. And so I enter it into my Cricut and writes it out for me, and I print it on black cardstock. And this one's do all things with love and flowers. So I have sprayed it with a fixative because those are all water activating items, and if I were to touch it later on with a wet hand, it would activate the distress ink. So I sprayed it with a fixative, but the only fixative I have is a gloss, and I don't like gloss hardly ever. So I then add some of the Liquitex matte finish to kind of tone down that gloss. And once that's done, it dries and it's all done. I hope you enjoyed this one, and it's easy, it's layered, but you all have a great day. Give me a subscribe and a thumbs up, and see you next time.